Hello, Blenders. It's Sean, and where is my intro music? Well, I needed to sort of disrupt the normal flow of an episode to explain something that happened this week. We did a conversation in this week's episode, which you were about to listen to, about the coronavirus and the impact that it potentially could have on the film industry. And in that conversation, Jake and Kevin and myself speculated pretty heavily on whether some of the tentpole blockbusters that are on the upcoming release calendar would get pushed back. And we went into great detail about Bond specifically, No Time to Die, which was due out in April, because of its global marketplace. And we were getting into a really good conversation, I thought, about spoilers in particular, like if some areas are able to see Bond while others are not because of restrictions due to travel or groups being able to get out, would the Bond franchise and the producers involved in it want to protect the integrity of the movie and the story in general? Well, after we recorded and before we were able to get the episode online, it turns out that MGM and Universal and the Bond producers have decided to push No Time to Die back. It's going to be postponed from April to November of 2020. And that, to me, is massive news because it almost feels like, and I think one of us says this in the conversation that you're still going to hear, once one studio does it, the dominoes tend to fall. And so I wouldn't be surprised now if we start to hear about some other films that shift their release date, specifically using the reason that the Bond franchise has given, which they actually say in their tweet, after careful consideration and thorough evaluation of the global theatrical marketplace, the release of No Time to Die will be postponed. Well, now, of course, if you look ahead to films like Mulan and Black Widow, potentially even Quiet Place, and getting into the summer blockbuster season, all of these films could use that as an excuse. And so it'll be very curious to see where this story goes from here. So I just wanted to hop on, give a little explanation to the fact that we want to still keep the conversation in the show proper. It's a portion of a larger conversation we were having about the coronavirus and its impact on the industry as a whole. And I just found it pretty fascinating that this news broke in between us recording the episode and us being able to get it up online. So that's our explanation. And without further ado, let's get into the theme music and start this week's episode. Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 108 of ReelBlend, a podcast that thinks Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back was a strange choice for the opening credits of The Way Back. I mean, it's a choice, but I don't know if I would have gone with it. I'm just kidding. I haven't seen The Way Back, but I do love Sir Mix-a-Lot. I hope he finds his way into the movie somehow. My name is Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at SongBlend, and we have a lot of stuff to get to this week, including we're going to talk about The Way Back, as we mentioned, Ben Affleck's return to the big screen. We have an interview with the director, Gavin O'Connor. We are going to talk about Onward, in this week in movie segment, and we have a very special tribute to somebody who was super important to us as rising film journalists. So let me get right to the introductions, because when I say us, I mean my good friends and co-hosts of the ReelBlend podcast, Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hi, Kev.
Hi, Jonathan.
How are you, sir?
Jacob, how are you? And Gabe, I know you can't say anything, but hello.
Hello. And joining us in the third chair as well, too, the vice president of the Sir Mix-a-Lot fan club, and the owner of a very nervous dog because of the window washers that are nearby, Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hi, Jakey.
My man, how are your arms okay?
From
just because,
what?
because you were reaching so much with that joke.
Listen,
I'm
I was struggling at the beginning of this show.
I do.
Good one.
But what's funny is you were struggling, and then you got so excited at the joke you came up with.
Right.
And that was it.
Yeah, I know. Shouldn't have been that excited. Yeah, I gave it a shot. Anyway, plugs. I want to remind everybody, we have a community page over on Facebook that you guys can join, where Blenders are getting together and talking about all of the latest movie news. There's a ton of fun conversations between the Blender family. They're posting polls. They are asking for movie reviews and recommendations. They did a fun thing the other day that I think I saw Jake weigh in on about top Spielberg. Why was top 10 Spielberg trending all over?
I don't know. I just saw everyone started doing it, and then I thought, hey, I have thoughts.
You're such a follower. Why don't you lead? Do top 10 someone else.
Well, because the last time I tried to lead on this podcast, I got a bunch of people reaching out saying that was weird. Don't do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I want you to try that again just one more time.
Never.
I want Kevin to introduce the show. That'd be a lot of fun.
They'll fucking love it when Kevin does it.
We are now posting our episodes on BlendGame's YouTube page. So if you'd like to stream the show instead, head over there. And while you're there, be sure to check out my Westworld reaction videos. They're posting on the daily, and I'm about to start season 2, which I've been told is very, very different from season 1. And of course, we are available on all of your favorite podcast apps. So if you are not already subscribed, please do so and tell a friend. We crossed 1,800 followers on Twitter this past week, which is a big accomplishment for us. We're hanging on 96 iTunes reviews, and that's bothering me. I kind of want to just get to the nice round number of 100. So if 4 people could submit fake reviews, I would love that, please. And we may read them on the show. Weekly poll. Let's get right to the weekly poll because, like I said, we have a lot of stuff to get to. Kevin, the poll question this week was, which March release are you most excited for, Blenders? And I gave 3 options. I want you to tell me which one that you think won the poll. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Mulan, number 1. A Quiet Place, number 2. The Way Back, number 3, or Other was given as a choice.
I mean, I would imagine Quiet Place, considering the success of the box office of the first one. I would assume I'm going to go Quiet Place Part 2.
You are 100% correct. It dominated with 62% of the polling. Now, I want to ask you guys this because it feels like the marketing for that film has slowed down a tad. I feel like I saw a trailer early on and now they're backing off a bit. Is it just because we have a long time to go before it opens? A long time to go, meaning 3 weeks from now, because it's been heavy Onward and Mulan is what I've been basically seeing.
Yeah, but I also feel like awareness is still pretty high. Like, you're right. Haven't seen. Then again, I also don't watch. This is going to sound super snotty. I don't watch television that has commercials. Like, I don't really watch network TV, right?
Mr. Ratatata.
And football is over, so like I'm not really watching anything that has commercials these days. So I don't really know what's promoting. That being said, everyone knows this movie's coming out.
Right.
We've talked about, gearing up to interview certain people from the film. And whenever I tell people about it, they're like, oh, I can't wait to see it. So whether or not trailers are out there, it isn't stopping the awareness, which is what matters.
It's also to the point too, like after that first trailer, I don't want to see anything else.
Agreed.
With regards to it. Because it feels like it's a twisty sort of story that I wanted them to hold their surprises. So
yeah.
Can I ask a question that I've wanted to ask since I saw the first one? And this is, I know this is going to sound like a joke, but it's really not. What if you pass gas in the Quiet Place? Like,
you get killed.
You get killed.
Does that alarm?
I saw an interview with Krasinski, and they were like listing certain things that make noise. Right. And the one that got me was that he basically said, there are no more dogs. Like, all the dogs have been killed because you can't stop a dog from barking, which was like a really heavy. So like
that's
dogs
really dark.
and Kevin, because Kevin would fart and then laugh, scream bathroom blend, and then he would be killed.
Well, that's the thing. It's like one of my favorite pastimes in life is hanging out with my friends, and like we all get goofy sometimes, and we'll fart at some point. And I just wonder if
you would all be dead.
Yes. Do you guys remember that scene in the movie?
You wouldn't make it a week.
Where John Krasinski and his son are walking through the forest, and they see the old man who was like grieved, and he's like gearing up and like getting ready to scream, and John Krasinski's trying to tell him no. I picture like I look at Kevin, and Kevin like has a pun, and he's like boiling up inside, and I'm like shaking my head like telling him no, and then Kevin just lets out this horrible pun, and then I just start sprinting through the woods, and then you hear the music go dun 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 dun, and then bam, it just gets Kevin.
Yeah, but see, like, they could have called the movie A Quiet Place Fart 2. Like, they could have easily done that. I don't know why they didn't do that. But.
How do I make this transition from that to our interview with Gavin O'Connor? Gavin, if you're listening to this show, I apologize. Gavin O'Connor is a tremendous director who has worked on a number of outstanding films. I hate to do this to a director. You know, sometimes when they make a film that's so outstanding, that when you're introducing them, you automatically default to that film. Like, I can't mention Gavin O'Connor without mentioning Warrior. Maybe it's partly because I feel that that's still an underrated film. You know, even though I think more people are finding it over the years, but I'm always like Gavin O'Connor, who directed this amazing movie Warrior, but like The Accountant did really well as too. I'm hearing good things about The Way Back. He's made some
Miracle.
Oh God, right, exactly. So I mean, he has really good films on his resume, but to me, Warrior is just so high up there that I always have to sort of lead with that. But
Gavin O'Connor
maybe that's not a problem.
also has a fart joke in The Way Back.
No, he doesn't.
I'm not kidding you at all. At some point, someone calls somebody Uncle Fart Poop. And I gave Gavin credit for that. I said, thank you for including some type of potty humor in your movie. See, he gets it. He gets it.
Brendan's nickname with his former principal, this is going to be a long way around. Michelle taught at Brendan's school from kindergarten through 5th grade. Like he went to Michelle's school. And so he spent a lot of time after school because she drove him home. And one day he was hanging out in the classroom. It's probably like 3rd grade. And he wrote on the whiteboard with what turned out to be permanent marker. And he didn't know it at the time.
Oh.
And he wrote Fart McNuggets. For no reason whatsoever. And the principal... I
love your son because he likes Shirley Temples and he gets my humor.
And the principal thought that was the funniest thing that she'd ever heard in her entire life. And it's become one of those stories that she tells to everyone that she knows because it was written in permanent marker.
Yeah, and that principal would totally be behind Bathroom Blend.
Oh, 100%.
She totally would be. Yeah.
Yes. Well, anyway, so there's a fart joke in The Way Back, the new movie that's coming out in theaters. And we were able to speak to its director, Gavin O'Connor.
Now, Gavin is listening to this podcast going, never again. I will never go on this podcast ever again.
Far more important things, including Ben Affleck being his leading man once again, and the drama of putting together one of these come from behind basketball inspirational films. And so why don't we just have us stop talking for a little while and toss it to Gavin O'Connor, the director of The Way Back, here on the exclusive ReelBlend interview.
All right, guys, Kevin and I are super psyched. Yesterday, we were in New York and got to sit down with Gavin O'Connor to talk about The Way Back, and now we get to chat with him for ReelBlend. Gavin, thank you so much for chatting with us again, man. Good to see you again.
It's good to be with you guys. Thank you.
So I'm sure you probably actually already know this, but I thought it would be a cool way to start off the interview. Today is the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice. And whenever I saw that, I had to, one, go back and watch all the original videos, and then I had to watch Kurt's halftime speech for Miracle. And I'm just curious about, just because that's such an amazing speech. I'm curious about when you hear 40 years since that day, you know that moment better than most. What does that mean to you?
It's funny. I woke up this morning to a lot of emails and texts reminding me of the anniversary. And I just remember what it evoked was when I was a boy, and I remember being 6 inches away from the television screen, watching that game, not even realizing that it was taped. I thought it was live. I didn't know. And I'm watching the game, and then obviously, we won. And then it was this joyous celebration in my house. And then I remember I grew up on Long Island in Huntington, and out in the street in my neighborhood, it's a very blue collar working class neighborhood. There were people with pots and pans, and it was like New Year's Eve. So that came up for me. And then the opportunity to tell the story. I remember going up to Disney. I'd never made a studio movie. And then they talked to me about making the film. And it was such an indelible part of my life. It was such a strong moment in my life. I really wanted to be able to tell the story. And then the other thing that brought up for me was, it was sort of became this Rashomon experience, because as I started talking to all the players, they all had a different perspective on the same event. They all had a different perspective on the same moments. So
that's cool.
It was very liberating in a way when, I'd ask them what happened in Norway when Herb was skating them, and they all had a different interpretation of that night. So for me, it was like Rashomon. It was liberating. I took a little bit from what Jim Craig said and a little bit from what Jack O'Callahan said. And then I just started to combine it all. And then lastly, the thing that popped in my head was I remember calling up Herb Brooks, and I asked him, I said, Herb, in my research and in the script, you took 3 months to pick the team. I go, did you really, why 3 months? It just seems like a long time. And he goes, well, I had my team pick going in, but, with the IOC and the AAU and all these different Olympic committees, he said it was very political. He said, I was so grateful to have the job and I really wanted to coach this team that I had to kind of play the game, the political game. He said, I said, but did you know your team going in? He goes, yeah. He goes, I literally had my team written down on a piece of paper. And 3 months later, that's the team I chose. I just had to go through kind of like the political gymnastics to play the game. And I said, okay. I go, here's what I'd like to do because I'm rewriting the script. I'd like to have you pick the team in a day. And I go, that to me is the spirit of the story, because if you said you didn't know your team, I couldn't do that. But since you did know your team, if I have you pick the team in a day, what would that do to everybody in the Olympic committee? He goes, oh, that would piss everybody off. I'm like, exactly. Let's piss everybody off. Let's start right out of the gate. You're ruffling feathers because that's who you are. And let's have you. And I go, I know we're going to remythologize and people, but I go, that's the spirit. And that's movie making. He was like, I love it. I would have picked the team in that day. He goes, I said, do I have your blessing? He goes, you have my blessing. And that's what we did. It was a lot of that stuff where I would call the guys and call Herb Brooks and, get their permission for things, or I ask them a lot of questions. And then lastly, the last thing I'll say about is two things. But I remember, I think it was in August I remember getting a call I became close with Jack O'Callahan. He was the one guy. I really liked Jack a lot. I remember Jack called me and said, I got bad news. Herb just died. So I just started cutting the movie. And so Herb was in me because I really liked Herb so much. So he was in me in the whole process. And obviously we dedicated the movie to him. And lastly, I would just say this. When we got to, when I cut all the hockey, the actual, the Olympic games, I needed to have Al Michaels come in and now do all the voiceover, do the announcing. And cool. So, I'm making stuff. So it's not exactly what happened in real life because it's a movie. So things are cut differently and different things happen. And though I replicated very specific plays, other things I didn't. And I could see Al was when Al came in, he was, he didn't know what was going on, but I started to show him some things and he was like, oh, wow, this looks real and this looks all good. And then we started to do it. But we got to the moment, which says, do you believe in miracles? Yes. And he said to me, he goes, I can't do that again. And I go, no, of course. I go, how? It's impossible. It was in the moment. You were experiencing the most emotional, joyous occasion. It was like, fucking Beethoven moment here. So how could you? But the problem was everything was, on tape back then. So his, do you believe in miracles? Yes, was so dirty. Everyone, my editor, everyone on the sound team, everyone at the studio kept saying to me that we can't use the original track. Do you believe in miracles? Yes, because it doesn't sound good. So Al and I tried to do it and he would do it. And it was horrible because how could you replicate that? And I'll never forget, I got on the mixing stage and, it was my first studio movie. I have Mike Minkler, who, does all, Tarantino's movies. He's one of the great sound mixers. He's saying to me, Mike Minkler saying to me, you got to redo this. You can't do it. And, in any event, I was a young filmmaker and I was just like, you guys be great at your jobs, figure out how to filter this thing and make it sound great. And I ended up keeping the real call in the movie. That's the real thing.
Oh, wow.
And I'm very grateful that I, wet behind the ears, never made it, but I was like, I dug in. And I remember at the premiere, Al came over, he hugged me, he goes, thank you for not using the bad one, for keeping the original. So all that stuff came up. Great. I mean, it was just so many things, but yeah, it's a pretty amazing day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We all love Miracle, and we've all cried watching Miracles. So that was actually really interesting insight. Jake talks about that, Kurt Russell's speech, and what I found interesting about the way back is that you went R-rating on this, an R-rated film. And when the trailers hit, I didn't actually expect the film to be R-rated. I was like, okay, normally like an inspirational sports film, I feel like delves more into the PG-13, PG realm, but you're dealing with high school kids here. And this is how high school kids talk. This is how the character that Ben plays talks. Was it a struggle to get the R rating? Was the R rating part of the mindset initially? And I guess I was going to add this onto it. If you could see an R-rated version of maybe like the miracle speeches or the something in Warrior. How fun would that be? But I guess maybe the path to the R rating with Way Back, was it hard to get that, the reasoning for it? And then could you imagine some of your other films having an R-rated version?
Well, in regard to the Way Back, I mean, there was language in the script that Brad had written, and I will admit that I ran with that. What happened was when Ben and I decided to make the movie and we took it to Toby Emmerich at Warner Brothers, he was running the studio and he runs the studio, and we just said, we know you guys don't make these kind of movies, but something we really want to make, and would you finance a film for us? And he read the script that weekend and said he said that, he ran numbers, whoever runs numbers at the studio, they do all that stuff. And he said, if you can do it for this number, you can go make the movie and I'll see you at the premiere. And that's what he did. We figured out how to make it. And then I never got a note. There was never a question about rating. He just said, just go make the movie. And he literally goes, I'll see you at the premiere. And that's what it was. So I just wanted to be honest and authentic. And that's who Jack was. There was a language, and that just felt real to me. And the kids use language that felt real to me. And, we got an R rating because it's not like we have sex. There's not violence. There's no blood. It's all language. So it could have been easy, but it just didn't smell authentic. So, maybe it'll affect us at the box office, but we weren't thinking that way. We were just trying to honor just the authenticity of the character and the story.
Yeah, but you got Joker making $1 billion. I think R-rated films are doing really well now if the content is there, in this story specifically. But yeah, could you imagine any of your miracle speeches with an R rating?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know about Miracle and Warrior. I would say that I had a mandate at Warrior at Lionsgate. They said you have to get a PG-13 rating, and I was like, because I really thought it was going to be an R, and I'm like, how the fuck am I going to do that with all this fighting, And sorry, I just dropped an F-bomb.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah,
am I right?
We have an R-rated podcast.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. But anyway, so then I remember I watched all the Bourne movies, which were PG-13, and I was watching all the fighting. Going, okay, so it's really just about blood. It's not about the intensity of the fighting. It's really just about blood. So I was okay there. And then I knew I got one F-bomb. You get one F-bomb in a PG-13. So that became like a fun game for my friend Anthony and I, who I wrote the movie. Like, where do we do the F-bomb? And we ended up giving it to Tommy in the casino scene with Nick when he drops the F-bomb there. But yeah, so I'm sure I could have made that with R very easily, but I was handcuffed.
Does Edgerton fight you on that and go, come on, Gavin, I want it?
Nah, I don't remember. No, Joel, no, he didn't fight me on that. He was cool about that.
Gavin, we spoke pretty extensively yesterday about what sports movies do right. And the big thing is a lot of them is that you don't make it about the sport, you make it about a metaphor for life. And the best sports movies do that. But I kind of want to flip that a little bit. Did you ever look at sports movies, specifically ones that aren't good? And are there attributes that some sports movies, like things they do wrong, that you looked at them and went, okay, certain movies do that and it's not good, so I need to make sure to avoid that?
I didn't watch any sports. I'm just at the point in my life. Any free time I have, I hang out with my wife and kids. So I just wasn't watching movies. I just wasn't. I mean, I played sports all my life. I'm very comfortable in, dealing with that subject matter. I've been in a lot of locker rooms. I've had a lot of coaches. So the one thing I think I can't remember if we talked about this yesterday, but I did have aspirations of shooting the basketball in this really unique way, something no one's ever seen, like trying to break the chains of how. And I realized very quickly that was not going to happen. There's a way to, you have to, the audience needs to feel balanced. They need to understand the geography. They need to understand where everybody is. There are things that, and I wanted to create a kineticism and what it feels like subjectively to what a game would feel like, but I kind of just started to discover that there's kind of a traditional way to shoot it that keeps the audience not confused, which was important to me. And, I think we talked about yesterday, I never thought I was making a basketball movie. So I just never really thought about the basketball part of it that much, or watching sports films. I didn't do it.
So in that sense, do you approach it? Do you as okay, I'm going to make a drama that features basketball, not I'm going to make a basketball movie that features some drama?
100%. Basketball, it could have been any sport. Basketball is just a vehicle to dramatize the journey of this man. The whole point of the basketball for me was that he just gets to parent again. He lost a child. And, when you're a high school basketball coach, you're a parent. So he got to parent again. He got to be a dad in a way with boys. He lost a boy. Yeah. So that to me was really important. And there were things that I was discovering as I was making the movie. I remember coming to work one day. I shouldn't say work. I tried not to play. I like to call play. But I remember going to the gym one day and we were shooting some of the practice stuff. And I said to Ben, I'm like, dude, we have this kid Kenny who's spreading the love with all the girls. And and I go, there needs to be consequences for that. He this is a teachable moment for a dad to teach his son to live in integrity. This is not how you treat women. So, Ben was like, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, I think that he should make this kid do wind sprints. And Ben said, how many
You've never done a wind sprint, man. That turns into a punishment real fast.
Suicides, yeah.
Suicides, exactly. That's what we call them in school.
Exactly. And then Ben said, well, how many suicides? And I go, well, Jack doesn't decide that. And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, the 3 girls that he's been misleading, will reveal them on the sidelines and they get to decide how many wind sprints this kid does. And so there were things like that, which were not in the script that we were discovering along the way that were, once again, parenting moments that were important to both of us.
Gavin, something I discussed with you yesterday in the interview, I wanted to bring back up here because I think there's something I wanted to talk to you about it, another question, another angle on it, because you said something so powerful yesterday about filming that scene with Ben Affleck's character and his wife in the film. You had a quote in an earlier interview where you said during that moment when Ben's breaking down, you said that I think that was him, meaning that was Affleck's pain on the screen and not only just Jack the character. You said something yesterday when I asked you that question about there were takes that were so honest that you didn't want to include them because they were almost too personal. So could you elaborate on, again, what you meant by saying, I think that was Ben in that scene, but also the restraint of not to include things that maybe put him too much in that scene?
Yeah, well, that was another scene that there was a discovery as we got deeper into the shoot and deeper into the story that it seemed like Jack needed to make amends to his wife. So when we, stage the scene and put it up and, after conversations, then I did say to Ben, I said, look, I'm just going to roll and, we're going to do the scene. And then when I feel like it's over, I'm going to just we're going to keep rolling, go back to one and we'll do it again. So you just get cooking. And I said, let's try to, calibrate different emotional, temperatures and levels to the scene and we'll see what happens. Because I don't know, I try not to go, it's got to be this one way. Like, let's just explore it and see what happens. And then if we just keep exploring it honestly. And there was one particular take where, it was like the dam just broke. The dam fucking broke. It was like Niagara Falls. It was crazy. It was so hard to watch. I remember when it was over, I didn't say anything. It was just pin drop silence in the room. The crew, everyone was just like, they couldn't believe what they just witnessed because it was just heart wrenching because, it was real because I just was watching and going, he probably had that amends conversation in real life.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the things he wanted to say, he didn't say that he got to say today. And it just became this, but it's the interesting thing about acting is, as painful as it is and as what looks like suffering is actually cathartic. And if you're doing your job right as an actor, it actually feels good. Because when you tap into something really honest, that's your job as an actor, is to evoke honest emotions. And even if it's imaginary circumstances, although these really weren't that imaginary. But your job is as painful as it was hard to watch and it was really heart wrenching. It was also in a way so fucking beautiful and so, brave and courageous, but just deeply in a penetrating way, like so honest. And, I remember watching it go, that's going to be in the movie. But when I built the scene, it was too much. I actually didn't think an audience would be, I worried that an audience would almost it was like, this is too deep. This is too personal.
Yeah.
So I found a take that I thought it got him on the brink of it was in the right, he was always in the right emotion. It was all there and brimming. But I chose one that was a little less than, because I just thought it may be too much for an audience you may pull them out of the movie.
Wow, that's crazy restraint. Because I'm imagining how emotional that was. Wow,
that was such a great scene. I'm curious. Whenever you got signed onto this movie, you had to know obviously that there was going to be that personal element to it, because of everything that Ben has gone through. And I genuinely kind of felt bad for you guys yesterday, because I know all of you had to endure a lot more. I don't want to say like borderline, like intrusive personal questions on a junket than you would normally ever have to endure. Ben and I spoke yesterday about how this movie giving people the opportunity to ask questions that they would never get to ask. Yeah. Was there a part of you as a director that kind of just ever thought, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to have to deal with, for lack of a better phrase, like the TMZ element of enduring. Because I mean, Ben being one of the biggest stars on the planet, you're having to endure a lot more personal questions than I think I'd imagine you've ever had to in your career.
Yeah, that presented itself when Ben was in rehab, which was right when we started prepping the movie. He went to rehab, and I didn't know if the movie was going to come to an end, because we just started prepping, and then I couldn't reach him for a couple of days, which was weird that he wasn't, and I knew something was up, and then we all saw what happened. So after he detoxed, I went up to speak to him to decide, are we going to make this movie together, and how do we go on this journey together when you're in here for, 30, 60, however many days it was at this point that he had left. And he when he went to rehab, he actually went in with a basketball under his arm. When he went to rehab, he took a ball with him because we had just started, because he so wanted to make the movie. And he said, I really want to do this, Gavin. Like, we got to figure this out. So I worked it out with his agent and Toby at the studio where, we were going to be okay, and let us, and then Ben was getting furloughs out of rehab with a sober buddy, and we would meet at his house or at a gym. But what I discovered was when we would go to his house, because we would meet there and work, there was paparazzi everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like they're aware of this little movie we're making, and this is it just became very clear to me, like the subject matter we're dealing with now that he's in rehab and he's going to get out just as we start to shoot. Obviously this is going to become a thing that we have to deal with. And that's when it hit me, when I saw, like, it was just so much paparazzi outside his house. I was trying to get through all these people just to go work. And that's when it really hit me that this is something, and we're just prepared for it. And it's not a big deal for me. I mean, it's Ben's life. So, he's the one who has to, uncover more and reveal more about himself. And, fortunately he's okay talking about it. And, if he was in rehab right now, it'd probably be a problem.
Yeah.
But he's doing great. And,
he seemed great yesterday. He looked great yesterday.
He's doing great.
It seemed like he's in a really good place.
He's doing great. He's really doing great. Yep.
I'm very interested in the way your camera worked in this film. It was very documentary style, so much so that there were these great moments where we would be close up on Ben's face, and I could even see the camera slightly zooming during a moment. And it was very like we were capturing somebody's real situation on film. So I wanted to ask you about the choice to shoot it that way, the idea of almost letting the audience know the camera's there a little bit because you are zooming within a very close-up shot. And then the idea of you shooting it digitally and it still almost looked 16 or 35. Like, it looked raw, very dirty. So much so that even like Ben's hands, the dirt under his nails, the whole film just felt kind of not dirty, but you know what I mean, like grainy. Yeah. And like as we were kind of experiencing it. So can you talk about those choices? I think they were very interesting choices for the character.
Well, I initially was going to shoot the movie on Super 16. I'd never shot digitally before. I've only shot on film. I was going to shoot at Super 16. There were some panic at the studio about shooting at Super 16. I was like, I want this movie to feel intimate. I want it to feel immediate. I want it to feel subjective. I want the audience to feel like, because it's a character study, I just want the audience to feel like they're, in a way, times a fly on the wall, just, being privy and witnessing this guy's personal, private moments. And so that's the road we were going down, myself and my cinematographer, Edu Grout. And the studio was just slightly resistant, and we kind of had these conversations and pricing things out. And then they informed me about a company called LiveGrain, which is a company that it's an amazing thing. So if you shoot digitally, usually with digital films, you can put grain. You could put grain on, but it's like a layer on the, almost like a layer on the lens. It looks like a layer on the screen, but there's no dimensionality to the, so it just feels like almost like snow or something just on top of the frame. And what LiveGrain does is they replicate, they'll take any, film stock. They have film stocks from 80 years ago, and they can replicate and dimensionalize the grain. And you can actually, it's an unbelievable thing that is a new,
Your film looked like film.
It looks like film, I know. So once I found LiveGrain, and then I started doing all these tests with LiveGrain and how dense we can make the grain, and because I wanted it to feel like a 70s movie. And it was astounding. It was an astounding, discovery, the technology today that you can do this and make it look like film, not like that kind of superficial grain on top thing, but what film has, which is 3-dimensional, it's just dimensionalized grain. So that was, so once I did that, then I started shooting digitally, which was great because in digital, I can shoot for 20 minutes. I can do a take for 20 minutes because I like to just keep rolling. The mag, you're not running out of film. So that was liberating too.
A testament to how good it looks. Kevin and I sat next to each other at the screening, and the second that Ben popped up on the screen and he's on the construction site, Kevin leaned over. I don't know if you remember, and goes, "It looks like this was 35." And
I was like, this looks 35.
Yeah. So I know we're running short on time, so I think each of us are going to ask one last question. And I want to bring up something that was casually dropped in the interview yesterday, and something that you just sort of touched on. In the scene where Kenny has to run suicides because he was kind of messing around on a couple of different girls, and the girls are the ones that get to send out the punishment. Your daughter is one of the 3 girls. Yeah. And I'm curious as to how that did you go over to her and say, hey, I kind of like, it'd be fun if you did this. Was she asking to be in the movie? Because that's an interesting role to have your daughter do.
It's very interesting. My daughter has been she's a little theater nerd. She does all the school plays. She's been asking me for years to be in something. I've never, ever cast her in anything. And then, she's like, Dad, can I just let me do something, please? Let me be in it somewhere, anything. And there were high school girls. So there wasn't a lot of options. It was one of these 3 girls. And, so I had her, she did it and she did a great job. It was fun. And then I remember I said to Will, who plays Kenny, I'm like, look, you can't kiss her. There's no kissing. But then when I was doing it, I remember I was shooting the scene, and I'm like, if it wasn't my daughter, I would have him kiss her because that's what the character would do. And I just was like, stop being a fucking protective dad. And I didn't tell my daughter, but I said to Will, just, don't get crazy, but give her a kiss because that's what the character would do. And he did. And she was like, that's what's in the movie. And then I remember she improv like a line to him when he was leaving. She's like, good luck in the game or something, which she improv, which I laughed. I thought that was funny and cute and smart. It was a good improv. And it was fun. It was a great day with her. We had a blast. She was
so many props for the kid that played for Will for playing Kenny, because that's a no-win situation for him, man.
True. Yeah, but he did great. He's that kid. I love that kid. He's wonderful.
So I can ask this question in a non-spoilery way, and if it gets too spoilery, we can cut it. But the last shot of your film is in the trailer, and so I just thought that maybe I kind of wanted to ask you about that shot particularly because it's a shot that you pull wide. This gorgeous beat of water and the basketball court right there. Ben is taking shots, a couple of them at a time. One of them misses at one point. Do you do that once? Like, does he say, I want to make them all? Is that's really him the whole time? Can you just talk about that idea, that shot?
Well, when I found that basketball court on that location, I just was like, it just felt like liberating. And it was the first time we watched him pick up a basketball. And I just thought it was really cinematic and very California. So I really like that. So the trick, like I could make any ball go in the basket at any point with visual effects these days. So it didn't matter.
Yeah, I like that he missed one.
Yeah. Well, he did miss one. But there were more that he missed, in different takes and some he made. So, there was, but I wanted the missing. So, even if he missed two, I made sure one went in, then there was the miss, which was intentional. I didn't want him, or Ben said, do everyone go, everyone go in. You have the guy, I don't care how good you are. Michael Jordan, if he hasn't picked up a basketball in 17 years or whatever, 20, you can miss. It doesn't make you bad because you missed a shot. So I just wanted it to feel real, and I don't know. That's what happened there.
I don't know why. Like, as I was watching it, I just felt that miss was actually a really important thing. I don't know. I thought it hit me bigger than I thought. I think it would. It was just a missing of a shot, but it was it almost humanized him.
Exactly.
It humanized him.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been so easy it would have been so easy to have him. By the way, in real life, going out there, because I play back, like with the wind, it's not that easy to make those shots no matter how good you are. The wind is really strong coming off the ocean. You gotta overcompensate. So, it wasn't that easy. So there was a couple that I visual effect to go in to make it look smooth. Yeah.
All right. Well, it looked awesome.
I know we have to let you go, but Jake was saying we were in the screening, kind of talking about 35 millimeter. I also want to thank you for Uncle Fart Poop. I appreciate that one as well. I enjoy that kind of humor. So
a theater full of adults, and you just heard Kevin go, that's funny.
Well, Kevin, so that I would say that was in the script. Brad Inglesby likes the fart poop stuff. That was important to him. I honored Brad for that. And I have to say one thing, Brad, by the way, guys, I have to say one thing because we're talking about Ben and we all signed up because of a script that Brad Inglesby wrote. He's a wildly talented writer. He wrote an incredible piece of material and then became a partner to Ben and I because, once again, as a filmmaker, you want to make it personal. So he was really great about allowing me to kind of bend it in different directions and try different things. And then there were times I'd call him and say, can we rewrite this scene? I wanted to go in this direction with it. And he'd be like, yeah, sure. And he'd write it better than I could have written it. And cause it's his story, it's his script. So he was an amazing collaborator and partner on that. I want to make sure we honor that because this all started because of Brad and he's a good friend and he's a great writer. And I'm just grateful that I got to become friends with him and be able to interpret his script in a way that I know he's happy with too.
Gavin, I know we have to let you go, but I just thought of something, and I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want my producer to get mad at me, but I had this question in my mind while I watched the film, and I was just looking at my notes that I took while watching your movie, and I was like, I have to ask you this. You have scenes in the film, and I'll keep this quick, where Ben's character is clearly drinking. And I was curious, was that still weird to shoot stuff like that? I know it's not really alcohol in the movie. I know that you use fake, I don't know what they use for fake beer or fake liquor, but was it still weird to shoot stuff like that, to have him even act like doing that? Yeah, it was weird because the first week, I designed it where the first week we were just in his house doing a lot of the drinking stuff by himself. The scene with the case of beer that goes down to, so yeah, it was weird because he just got out of rehab and now it's sensitive because I didn't know if he was going to have triggers and sense memory of what it's really like, even though it's not really drinking, what it really, the beer can in your hand and the taste of alcohol, even if it's not really alcohol, but so yeah, that was delicate stuff. It was delicate stuff. Yeah. I was fascinated by that. Well, thank you so much, Gavin, for joining us. I'll let Jake close this out, but we appreciate you coming on. All right, Kevin, thank you very much, brother.
Yeah, I think, sometimes I think I speak on behalf of Kevin and myself. It's tough to come up with just enough questions for one junket interview. And I think between the junket interview and today that you made a movie that, we probably still have 1,000 more questions we could ask you. So thank you for making such a powerful film. And thanks for spending so much time chatting with us.
Well, I appreciate it, Jake. And lastly, I just want to say to you guys, this is appreciated because, as you guys know, probably as good as anyone, these kind of movies don't get made very much anymore. Capes and tights, that's what everybody wants, a superhero movie. So we really need, we need the love, man, because I don't know, but like I go to any of these small movies. I just go. I give them my money because we need these movies in our industry. If these movies don't succeed, our business it's already changing, but it'll change in a way that I don't think is good for our industry. So, I'm just from my heart, I'm very, very appreciative to you guys for even just, taking the time to, give us or the movie some love and just shine a light on it because, we need it. So I thank you guys for that.
Oh, dude, this podcast is all about movies like this.
Cool, man.
Long Island has to stick together. Our other co-host is from Long Island. My whole family's from Long Island.
Oh, cool, man.
Port
I've heard of Long Island.
So, yeah, so
Well, I'll be listening to the podcast. So I'll be saluting you guys then. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Gavin. Appreciate it. Good to talk to you,
Bye.
man.
Bye, Jake. Bye, Kev.
Bye. So believe it or not, we do have the capacity to have serious conversations about serious films. You wouldn't know it from the preceding conversation to that interview, but we do have the ability to get serious for a second. And thank you to Gavin for coming onto the podcast, and thank you for Warner Brothers for helping facilitate that. Kevin and I were with him the day before we did the interview in a gymnasium, like a high school gymnasium, which was really cool. I thought it was a really great conversation.
I want to tell you guys something cool about that gymnasium. That is the same place where Fox last year did The Kid Who Would Be King, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, same exact location. And this will blow your mind. Maybe it won't, but it blew my mind at the time. My father went to that high school.
No.
Yes, he did. Years and years ago. That's the neighborhood that my parents are from. And my father went to that school for 2 years before they threw him out, before they kicked him out.
They threw him out?
Yeah, they kicked him out for, attendance issues and just being a general teenage badass. But and he ended up going to a different school where he met my mom. And then
wow.
Yeah, but they're all from that small neighborhood. And so it was really weird to go to that junket for The Kid Who Would Be King with Brendan, because Fox invited Brendan to come and do the interviews for that thing and then walk those hallways. And it's a really old school for people who don't, who've never seen it. What's it called? Xavier? Is that what it is? I forget the name of it.
Isn't it Saint Xavier or something like that?
Saint Xavier.
Yeah, it's an old school. I think Todd Phillips built it like years ago. Yeah.
And so to be there with my son and to think like my father walked these halls years and years ago before they kicked him out was bizarre, very strange. So
that's crazy.
It has nothing to do with neither here nor there, but go support The Way Back. We're going to get to a full-on review, no spoilers, later on in the show when we do This Week in Movies. We're going to get to news really fast, and we were initially going to talk about Spielberg potentially leaving Indiana Jones Part 5, but we shuttled that when we realized that we lost James Lipton. James Lipton, who is the host of Inside the Actors Studio, and Jake, it's funny, Jake was talking about this before the show. More people might recognize him from the Will Ferrell impersonation that Ferrell did on Saturday Night Live. And I'd almost forgotten that he did that. Jake, did he do it often?
He did it often enough on the best of Will Ferrell DVD, which I had back, when we had DVDs. That sketch was on there. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times, especially outside of Chicago, people might not realize that like Harry Carey was an actual Cubs announcer. And not just, and whenever people ask like, okay, wait, who is Harry Carey? I go, the Will Ferrell SNL character. Like, hi, everybody. Yeah. Like, same thing with James Lipton. He gave him, like, he had this high stack of questions. And he would, in this very almost borderline pretentious British accent, which is funny because James Lipton didn't have a British accent, which he called him out for one time. He would ask these very long, superfluous, and make these big, bold, grand statements like, E.T. is perhaps the greatest film ever made by man. Buy it or rent it. Like this very like dramatic, borderline Shakespearean. But James Lipton, I saw an interview with him and Will Ferrell one time, and he had a really good sense of humor. But he just kept bringing out like, why did you give me a British accent? I don't have a British accent. But I always love that.
So he's definitely somebody that we all look to when we were learning how to ask questions. Now, Lipton had a different setup, right? Like, the people came to the school specifically in order to come for these longer form interviews. They often would go deep into biographical questions, and then they would go essentially, it's a dream scenario. You walk through their entire career and you're getting some of the best, but they loved it because they got to do it in front of students at what's the school? I forget the name of the school. Is it the Actors Studio? I thought it had a name to it. Yeah, I thought it had a name to it, but maybe not. But they would really talk about craft. And Kevin, you want to talk about too. Like, you consider him and Howard Stern to be your two influences in terms of getting into interviews?
Yeah, I mean, well, Lipton was probably first because I used to sit. I had a sales job. I did the job that I'm doing now with the movie reviewing aspect for free for about 8 years. While I worked a sales job on the side, and I used the sales job to take vacation days and use the evenings of that to do the movie thing that I really wanted to do. That was my passion. And so I would sit at work a lot and I would watch a lot of inside the actor's studio because I was so fascinated with the deep dive that Lipton got to take with these actors. And it actually gave me a much deeper appreciation for acting in general. I just the idea of what Lipton was able to pull from these actors, where they went emotionally, their lives, how their family life created who they became as an actor. And then one of the episodes I think everyone's talking about that just struck me was the Bradley Cooper episode, which I think is honestly one of the coolest things I've ever seen on video, where you have Bradley Cooper as a student at I think it was Pace University was the name of the school, if I remember off the top of my head. I remember him saying Pace University. But Bradley Cooper stands up to ask a question to De Niro. De Niro was the guest that day. Cooper is not famous. Cooper is a student. De Niro is there as a legendary actor. And Bradley Cooper gets up and asks this brilliant question about the way De Niro wiped his eyebrow in Awakenings. And he wanted to know if it was a correction or something he added to the character. And I was blown away by the depth of the question. And then De Niro goes, "That's a good question." And then years later, they're making Limitless, Silver Linings Playbook, Joy, all these movies together, and it's truly amazing to think about that. And then Bradley Cooper's producing Joker, and De Niro's in Joker. I mean, you think about who that kid was, and just that show in general was just so beautiful. He would make these actors break down emotionally and find the places they had to go to as actors. The actors were crying on that show. They were almost like in therapy sessions with James Lipton because he was able to open them up like that. And the preparation, remember Lipton's cards?
Yeah.
He had those like stacks of blue cards. And like, you know, while we only do 4-minute interviews, I still write stacks of notes because of that. Like he really is one of the biggest inspirations on my career next to Howard Stern. See, I mean, people joke because Stern came from a very vulgar background of radio, but his interviews that he's doing now are just incredible. 1.5 hour long deep dive interviews with music artists and filmmakers and actors and directors. They had Tarantino on at one point. Harry Styles was just on the other day. I love Harry Styles. Listening to him talk was pretty cool. So I just found those two interviewers to be a big influence on me. Lipton specifically, because I've seen every episode of Inside the Actors Studio multiple times. I love every interview.
People ask me a lot. They're like, "Oh, is your dream job like what is your dream job? Is your dream job like to work for E, like a national like E or Access Hollywood, Entertainment Tonight, something like that?" And I always go, "No, my dream job is inside the Actors Studio." Like I could care less about working for. I mean, sorry if you're an E employee and you're listening, but like I couldn't care, honestly. Like I couldn't care less about working for Access Hollywood or E. Like that's not. If we're talking actual dream job, yeah, like having an hour with one of the greatest actors of all time, where I can start at the beginning. Like that's the dream.
I'm not trying to put us on any kind of a level, you know, but I almost feel like when we get our longer form opportunities
100%
on this show, the people who are listening to this show on the regular probably understand now when we're talking about James Lipton and the influence they had on us. Like, there's a reason that we come up with the questions that we come up with, the three of us, is because these are the types of things that we would ask if given a longer form, and we just don't get that in the junket situation, right? You have to rush through 4 minutes. You got to try to get a soundbite or get one. Like, that's one of the reasons why I was jealous, legitimately jealous of what James Lipton got, because he was given so much time. Now, again, you're seeing that episode, but it's cut down from a day of the interview. It usually goes much longer than what you're shown on the show. But he's also getting the people who are showing up prepared to go into that background, you know? Whereas when we get them, a lot of times they are 100% the opposite. They're guarded against questions like that. And so it's a completely different setup, and he benefited tremendously from that, you know, and brought the right questions to that type of scenario.
But in regards to what you're saying, one of the beauties of a longer form is that you loosen up the interviewee. And like they're like when you're in people don't realize, and again, this is not a complaint about our jobs, but when you have 4 minutes on television with a Joaquin Phoenix to break down Joker, there's really no time to create a connection and try and get a interview that's going to be out of a soundbite. And that's kind of what we all strive to do. I believe all three of us do and try to do is try to take them out of that 4-minute like setting and try and get something personal and something connected with the interview. And to be able to have this long form, like when we got Quentin Tarantino for 20 minutes, this is prior to us getting him for 2.5 hours, but the 20 minutes.
That's a thing.
But getting Quentin Tarantino for 20 minutes was one of the happiest things I have ever been able to do in my life.
Yeah.
Was to actually sit there with him for more than 4 minutes and talk movies and actually be able to relax and not think about what my next question was going to be. I could sit there and listen to his answers. And that's why it's something that Lipton did really well is that since he had that longer form, he was able to actually relax in the conversation and just talk to the person. Because generally most of the time, and Jake, I'm sure can chime in on this as well, I still do this and I did it a lot when I first started out. You're not really listening to the answers, because you're so worried about the timer to your left and then the next question you have to get to. If you have 4 minutes with a room and there's 2 big actors in it, you might get 2 questions and that's it. And you have to get to certain things. And so the idea of having a loose idea like that, being able to talk in long form is just incredible, which is why I love doing this podcast. I started off in radio and that's all I ever did was these long form interviews. So Lipton was the key. He was the guy that I looked at and went, you know what? I love how deep he takes these actors and I want to do something like that. You know what I mean?
I got to share a funny story with you guys too. PJ hung out with some friends on Friday and he texted me and said, we want to watch a horror movie. Can you make some recommendations? And I've shared this on the podcast. My boys aren't into movies the way that I am. Like that's dad's thing. And so when he does show an interest in a movie, like I get super excited. So I made a bunch of recommendations. Then he got back to me and he was like, oh, we're going to watch Joker. I was like, all right, that's a good fit, right? That should work out. And I said, afterwards, you guys can listen to our ReelBlend podcast with Joaquin Phoenix talking about the Joker. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to sit around in a circle and listen to Sean O'Connell talking to Joaquin Phoenix on ReelBlend. And I just love that
Sounds
he just
cool
ego checks me like that every chance that he gets.
Yeah.
So as we continue just to talk about Lipton really fast, what we thought would be a fun activity is, for people who don't know, he would end his interviews with these standard set of questions, these 10 questions he would ask the people. Now, again, they had time to prepare. They probably came up with clever answers long before they got there. I liked it early on when he got people and sort of caught them off guard with it. As they got later into the Inside the Actor Studios, the actors who came to show up were sort of ready for it. So we sent the questions around to each other. How would we want to do this? Like we each pick a question and ask it to one of the other people on the show? How should we? We're not going to go through all 10, but Jake, why don't you pick one to get us started and just ask it so that we can give you our answer to it. You do it in your best James Lipton voice too.
I can't because James Lipton's voice in my mind is Will Ferrell's voice, so I can't do it. Only because I feel like I swear on this show way more than you guys do because you give me reason to. And you guys are good people. I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite curse word? Which was his 7th question you would ask.
I have a very specific curse word. Obviously, I love fuck more than anything. I'll use fuck in like places where it just doesn't belong. But my favorite one is horseshit. But I say it the way Ben Affleck says it in Chasing Amy. I'll be like, that's horseshit, and drag it out as long as I can.
It's so funny. I feel like the word fuck really does actually give weight to anything you put it next to. I'm a big heavy metal fan. I was listening to the radio on the way home, and one of the lead singers of the band just added the F word in the middle of a sentence and just made him sound like that much cooler. I don't know why that word just like, if you put that word before something else, it gives it a serious tone, like a more like a weighted tone to it. And I just think it's just a powerful word in that regard. And I've always found it to be interesting because as I get older, that word still, when you hear it, it still sounds like a curse word. You know what I mean? It's not a normal word. It still sounds like a curse word, even though we say it all the time. But I would go with that.
All right, I'm going to ask, what profession other than your own would you two like to attempt?
I want to be a high school journalism teacher. And my plan whenever I'm done with this is to end up being a high school journalism teacher. I just
Why
love
high school?
because I feel like that's when you can still impact whether or not what direction a kid's going in life. By the time you get them in college, if you get a kid in a journalism class in college, it means they've already made a conscious decision to go into journalism or communications or something of that degree. High school, you could bring about an idea, turn on a light bulb that may have otherwise not been turned on. And the reason I like the idea of being a high school journalism teacher is none of my teachers really were journalists ever. And I had a lot of great teachers, but I didn't really have any of them that began lessons with, when I was out in the field. And I just picture this idea of if I'm a high school freshman, kind of interested in journalism, enough so that I took a class, and I walk into a classroom and I see pictures of my teacher with some of pop culture or history's most iconic people, and pictures of him holding awards and all kind of stuff. I'm going to sit down and go, I should probably listen to this guy. Now, I'm not saying it's going to make me go be a journalist, but it at least adds some legitimacy. And I love the idea of having every single one of my lessons tying to a real life experience that I've had, because by the time that I will be ready to do that and actually leave TV and go off and do that, I'd like to think that I will have a lifetime worth of lessons to teach kids. I want to be Mr. Feeney.
That is a great answer. Good Lord, Kevin. Good luck following that up.
Yeah, I don't have anything to follow that with except for I wanted to be a lawyer growing up.
Would you still want to be a lawyer?
Well, I didn't want to be a lawyer because it involved too much reading. And I just don't love to read. I really don't. I love watching movies and
He's never actually seen Parasite.
I'm such an ADD reader that I have a hard time. I know movies are different. When I'm watching subtitled films, I'm all in. I can read every aspect of it. But there's something about reading, I just get too distracted from it. So I was worried about doing all that reading in college for being a lawyer. But that was probably what I would have done. I'd love to be a therapist or also maybe teach film.
I'm learning so much about you guys. Kevin, you get to ask us a question now.
I want to know what Jake's favorite curse word is before I move on to my question.
Goddamn. Just because I feel like it's so applicable in so many different kind of scenarios, and I feel like it best when I say it, I feel like it most comes from inside me, there's a goddamn tree right there, I just feel like it really. It's the most me when I say it. It seems like it's the most natural to say for me.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I always like the heaven exists question personally.
I think we should all answer that.
All right, let's all answer that one, and then we'll move on to the next.
So, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates? And this was a question he would ask. And Jake, I heard you earlier because I watched the same clip because Dave Chappelle was on his show, and Dave Chappelle actually asked James Lipton that exact question. And what did he say? He said, Jim, I know you don't think I was real. What does he say, Jake? What's his answer?
Yeah, he said, Jim, you're wrong. I am real, but it's okay. You can come in anyway.
Right. It's a great answer. Mine would be I would want God to say Dunkirk. That's it.
I like that. Jakey?
Can I have two?
Sure.
Two? First one would be, I liked The Rise of Skywalker. And then the second one, probably the more serious one, would probably be hey, all your dogs are here. They've been waiting for you.
Aw, that's sweet. Mine would probably be food isn't fattening up here.
I feel like we all just got a little insight into who we are.
Into all we truly, truly are.
The crazy thing is we're going to get up there and it's going to be Gabe and he's just going to be wrapping us up. No. There is no wrap.
Your life is wrapped.
Your life is wrapped. All right, let's get to a more serious topic as well, too. Not that the passing of James Lipton is not serious, but we have to sort of get into the spread of the coronavirus and specifically how it could affect our industry specifically, because we're on the cusp of some major things happening potentially that might affect what we do and cover and the types of films that we're able to talk about in the coming weeks. Now, nothing major has happened yet. It's been a lot of sort of talk and speculation, but we wanted to sort of weigh in on the spread of this virus and how it's affecting different people, because right now it's a big travel thing. but we're starting to hear rumors and innuendo about big blockbusters potentially being shifted back. And even just how releases of major movies like Mulan and No Time to Die might be affected if they're not able to open in larger markets like China, where a lot of these people wait to see those receipts come back and really help a film's box office take. Do you guys think we're now at a point where these studios are rightfully concerned, or is it still too early in the game for the coronavirus to be something that drastically affects our industry?
I think there are absolutely meetings being had right now. Like, I guarantee you that every studio that has a major movie coming out within the next 2 months had a boardroom meeting today. The one that I'm most eyeballing is Bond. And I feel like that's the one, because I sort of feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I can't emphasize enough how much this conversation is speculative. Like, none of us know anything. We're not saying one way or another that anything's going to happen. But I just can't help but feel like I can almost, short of being in the room, guarantee that at least these conversations are happening.
I have a question along these lines as well, too. Do you think that a movie should push its release date back based on something like this? Because I don't know, like, I'm not quite sure what it benefits by pushing it back.
Okay, but here's the argument, though, is that it wouldn't really, like, it not being pushed back wouldn't affect us. There are groups of people who have put together letters specifically asking for Bond to be pushed back because they live in countries in which gatherings of large people are being prohibited right now.
Like Italy. Didn't that happen in Italy?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Gotcha. Okay.
So they're saying, look, like, something like Bond specifically, and I know I keep going back to that, is meant to be a global event. It's meant to be, we all get it together at the same time.
Okay.
And, look, and they're basically saying, we're not going to be able to get it by, if you stick to your current release date. So let's just make it fair for everybody and push it back to the summer.
Okay,
so I feel like
sense,
I feel like it's easy for us to say, hey, it's not a big deal. Just whatever. Like other people will get it later. Let us get it now. But for people that are very much excited about it and aren't getting it, it is a big deal.
So it's not a strictly financial thing. It's not strictly the studio receipts. It's the cultural impact of a story potentially being seen by some people, especially, and we do keep going back to Bond because that's one that feels like it's going to be majorly impacted by this, that it's Daniel Craig's final one. There's probably going to be plot details that you would want to protect.
Right.
And if you're in an area of the world where you're not able to see it because of some type of restrictions due to the coronavirus, then I could see that having a drastic effect on the film industry.
Though, to be fair, I feel like if a decision is made, it will be made based on finances.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like if it is pushed back, it's not because a group of people out of the kindness of their hearts wanted to protect fans from spoilers. It's because they realized that financially it made the most fiscal sense.
Kev, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my personal thoughts on this are that the film business is now more international than it is domestic.
Yeah.
There are movies being made specifically because they did well in China or other countries. For example, you look at films like Triple X, the second movie. I remember that movie coming out. I bring that up randomly because it crushed in China, but it didn't necessarily do well in the United States. And I bring that up because I feel like movies are being made production-wise now to play to international audiences more than they ever have before. That's, again, my own speculation. I just truly believe that. International box office is king. If you look at any movie's major box office receipts, Avengers Endgame, for example, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I think it made $2.7 billion worldwide. I believe 1.8 billion of that was international box office.
Yeah.
So if you are Bond and you are relying on international markets for your film to do well box office wise, for example, take a look at Skyfall. Skyfall made $1.1 billion worldwide at the box office. Roughly over 300 of that was domestic. The rest of it was all international. Mm-hmm. So the point I want to make about that is if you're going to release a film like Bond in the United States, I think the reason you would push it back is if you are afraid of what's going to happen to it within other countries, like China, like Italy, wherever the film is being released. Those are gigantic box office receipt areas. If you put the movie out in America and not put it out in China or other big countries, and the film gets pirated, that's going to hurt the box office. Now, I understand piracy is a thing we're dealing with all the time. It is fascinating to me that Bond is opening up in England on April 2nd before it hits the US on the 10th. So that could totally negate that entire argument. But if you do not release your film in a major market like China, you have to realize that that's going to definitely affect your box office for sure. So if you're a studio and you are under the impression that it might actually hurt your box office, why not push it back to the summer?
And also the countries that would be affected right now, the countries that are most affected by the coronavirus, those particular countries made up 38% of Spectre's box office. So, and that's just the countries that are affected right now, not to say that things could not get worse or better as time progresses. But right now, if No Time to Die were to open today, it would not be getting the countries that made up for nearly 2/5 of the previous film's box office. And that's a pretty damn big chunk.
Yeah. And you have to think about that from a perspective like Mulan then becomes a very interesting discussion. Mulan being the idea of it being an Asian-centered storyline. And how do you not open your film and give it to Asian audiences? And so, for example, that movie opens up in, 3 weeks? Was it March 26th, I believe is the release date on that? Someone double check that. But I do believe it is that date. So if you're Disney and you may not be able to put your movie in front of certain audiences, including China, what do you do? And that's a very interesting thing because that movie is specifically a foreign type of film, a film that's going to do well with foreign audiences, international audiences. So if you put the movie out in the United States and people in China want to watch that film, what are they going to do? They're probably going to download it.
You're looking ahead to two major Vin Diesel pictures in Bloodshot, and then if it keeps going into May, Fast 9 is a global franchise. You know, I mean, it has a huge
Bond.
American audience. Yeah, Bond is as well too. Black Widow is going to be huge too. It's something that we're definitely tracking, and unfortunately, we just don't have enough data to see. Now, one of the things that I'm looking at too personally is two conventions in South by Southwest and CinemaCon. That South by Southwest obviously takes place in Austin. CinemaCon takes place in Las Vegas. Las Vegas is, it's held in Las Vegas, but you would almost never even know that there was a convention going on there because there's so many people there anyway. And these are the types of places that feel like they're going to be drastically affected by something if it continues to spread. So I'm curious if those festivals, those industry type things, will keep going in the state that they're going to be in.
Interesting perspective, by the way. I mentioned XXX2 at the beginning of my argument. And the reason I brought that up is because there was a huge article that came out back when I remember when XXX came out explaining why films are being made for international audiences over domestic audiences. XXX's 2 box office, 13% was domestic, 87% was international. $301 million international box office for that film. So what, in my opinion, is happening is studios are understanding that certain films, like a Vin Diesel, does really well in this market or this international country. Bloodshot, I feel like, is a film that they're hoping does really well internationally. I don't think it's going to have a gigantic domestic box office. It's probably going to do very well internationally. So that's where this question comes in. Do you risk taking your film away from your international audience and releasing it in the US with piracy becoming a massive problem for that situation? Or do you just push it all the way to summer and blanket release it? Well, that's where the question is.
And I definitely want to point out, too, as we wrap up this conversation, like we're taking it from a film and business perspective.
Right.
There's a huge human element to this coronavirus, obviously, too. And we're deeply concerned about all the people who are being affected by the virus as well, too. This is a movie podcast. We're going to be looking ahead to these titles. We're going to be looking at this material, how it potentially affects, because we're fascinated with the decisions that get made behind the scenes by studios. Because you guys keep saying, push it back to the summer, but there's so much strategy in terms of release dates and open weekends and
open screens. Yeah, especially like Bond has an IMAX partnership.
Yep.
And if you move Bond to the summer, then you're dealing with Tenet coming out, which probably has an IMAX. That's an interesting aspect to it. And to Sean's point, I think it just goes without saying that the human element here is the most important part of this story.
Absolutely.
But that being said, we are a movie podcast, like he said, so that's the angle we're taking. But we are completely in understanding that the human part of it outweighs completely the importance of the movie part. But there was an article today that I sent you guys. Was it $5 billion? Is that what they were saying? That the movie industry will lose possibly within the middle of the coronavirus idea. So that's why we're talking about it. It is going to affect a lot more on the financial side as well, which is a very big, devastating thing as well. The human side being the most important, clearly.
Well, and if there's one guarantee about any movie that will be affected by the coronavirus, it's New Mutants, because they're going to figure out some way to delay that movie yet again. They'll push it back at least another year.
If it exists.
Dude, all right, let me ask you guys this. As we sit here right now, before we move on, does Bond get moved?
No, I don't think so. I think they hold. I think they hold steadfast because, and maybe I am naive, but while the numbers are high in terms of the people who are being affected by the coronavirus, I don't think that they are like that is a huge move financially for a studio to make. And I think for all the reasons that we just discussed, it's more beneficial from a creative, financial, logistic, like all the different headaches that they would have to jump through to push a film back. I think it's easier for them to keep it and then deal with the repercussions of some people didn't get to see it, in their area, but larger amounts of people did get to see it. I think you're starting to look at May, things like Black Widow, things like Fast 9. If this continues to grow as an epidemic, as something that people are dealing with, I think Bond is probably going to stay where it is. That's my guess. Put Mulan on Disney Plus. Let's move on. All right, this week in movies. Anybody see The Banker? The Banker, limited release, Apple TV. The Banker. Sam Jackson and Anthony Mackie. That's a real movie. I actually do know that movie exists. All right, here's one. The Burnt Orange Heresy. Burnt Orange Heresy? I did limited release? Nothing. Oh, wait, I got one. First Cow.
I've actually seen people saying very kind things about that online.
Well, I thought it was an odd follow-up for Damien Chazelle. But good on him for branching out.
Well, this is about the cow that jumped over the moon, as opposed to First Man was about the guy that landed on the moon.
Wait, I thought this was about the cow that gets spun up in the twister in Twister. I thought it was that story.
I'm not sure which story it is. I just know that the stakes are high.
The jakes are high. I was looking forward to seeing it if it was the Twister prequel. That's what I was hoping for. I wanted to know the life of that cow.
Emma expands wider. Emma with a period. Nothing. Okay. Have either of you seen Onward? Did you guys see Onward?
I saw Onward.
Oh, good. Kevin, give us a spoiler-free review of Onward, because I have to go to it tonight, and I'm going to be honest with you. I am not that excited. It's like one of the first Pixar films in a long time that I'm just not that enthused about going to see.
It's interesting. Onward is a film that looks really good on paper.
Okay.
I think Tom Holland, Chris Pratt coming off Avengers Endgame, doing a film together about two brothers who go on a journey to try and spend one more day with their father who passed away years before, well before Tom Holland met him, and then passed away briefly after, knowing his son Chris Pratt's character. But it's a film that necessarily should probably make you cry. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, that plot line, anybody who's lost a father, anybody who's wished they could spend more time with their father, I think that's going to probably hit people on a different level. My issue with the film is that those are universal themes. I have not lost my father, thankfully, knock on wood. But I've also watched a bunch of movies where characters do lose fathers, and I cry like a baby because I understand the emotions of what's going into that scene. The problem with Onward is it's so disjointed, in my opinion, and it's a little strange. It's almost like Weekend at Bernie's, but Pixar. I don't know if Gabe would agree with that, but there's a strange element to the idea of the father coming back in half form. And it was weird for me as an audience member, even though it's a Pixar movie, even though we're dealing with elves, there's something, it didn't connect with me. I found it to be odd that the father had no upper half.
Okay.
That seemed strange to me. And I know that's not really a criticism, but it took me out of the movie because it was just so weird within the context of the story, I thought.
I want to ask you a question about it, but I almost don't want it answered. So I'm going to refrain for my own benefit. Like, I have a plot question that I want to know, but I don't want to know. So I'm going to save myself by not asking.
But I mean, the film itself is fine, and I know Gabe saw it and he liked it. I would say I liked the movie. I just didn't love it. There was no emotional punch for me. Every Pixar film, from Inside Out to Up. Okay, Up's a great example. Up deals with the beginning of a guy losing his wife, right? I have not lost my wife, thankfully, but I understood the emotion of what he was going through in that scene. So I could emotionally attach myself and understand what it would be like to lose your wife. I did not fully grasp the idea of the weight of what it would be like to lose your father at that age through this story.
Okay.
It just didn't compute to me. On the other end of it, there are some great moments. Holland and Pratt are great together. Visuals are fantastic. I just thought the film was just a little too weird for its own good. So if that makes sense.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going tonight. Jake, you're not going to check it out? Jake, you got something else going on?
Yeah, I got a thing.
You got a thing. But you did see The Way Back. So why don't you take us through The Way Back?
The Way Back.
Yeah.
I liked The Way Back.
Okay.
I thought Ben Affleck actually gives what might be the best performance of his career. He's absolutely incredible. It's less of, and it's so interesting. There are two trailers with the movie. The first trailer, I think, is much more reflective of what the movie is than the second trailer. The second trailer makes it seem much more like this inspirational sports movie. It's more of a character study, and of a guy who is struggling with his own personal demons. And uses this vessel of being a high school basketball coach to kind of pull himself out of hell. But it's more about the demons than it is the basketball coach itself. I liked it. It never. If I'm using a metaphor, and and like you're in a house, and when a movie really moves you, you like your heart bursts through the ceiling.
It's like Onward. Like it didn't hit you.
Right. I felt like I was tapping the ceiling. Like there were moments where I was hitting the ceiling and I kept feeling like, okay, like any moment now we're going to burst through the ceiling and I'm going to feel what a buddy of mine calls capital P powerful. Mm-hmm. And it never quite capitalized. It was lowercase powerful for me. It's very I would absolutely recommend the film, but it never quite, I never burst through the ceiling the way that I thought that I was going to, and quite frankly, the way that I wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's the exact same way I felt about Onward. Both films, while wildly different, deal with very heavy thematics that anybody can relate to, no matter what you've been through in your life. And the way Jake explained The Way Back is the exact way I felt about Onward. I could see the horizon of the feels, of the emotions that I wanted to get to, and the movie set everything up for me to get there. It just never helped me get there. Okay. And I think that's what Jake's saying about Way Back, is I felt the same way. I thought performance-wise, Affleck crushed it. It is a little too real at times, because it's one of those weird things where when an actor takes on a role like this, that becomes an issue sometimes with suspension of disbelief. And I say that because as you're watching it, it's hard not to think about Ben Affleck. Yeah. Which is the exact thing you should not be doing when you're watching a movie, is thinking about the person playing the role. In this case, it's different because it's a therapeutic thing. I actually love that he did it. I think it probably really helped him to understand what he had gone through with his own situation. So I commend him for that. But there's something too close to this story that we all know from the news and the media and the TMZs of the world, where that story is a little too real for us. We've seen Affleck go through these situations. We've seen video of Affleck in very sad situations like this. So it's hard for your brain not to go to that. That being said, I want to give Gavin O'Connor credit for, in the interview you heard, The live grain they added to this film looked like 35. It looked unbelievable. I was shocked at how good the cinematography was. They shot it digitally, but it had a Super 16 look to it. They shot it documentary style. It was meant to be raw, like you were there, like you were capturing a moment with people that you weren't supposed to be seeing. One thing that Gavin said in the interview, which I thought was interesting, was there's a scene in the film where Ben's character has an amends with his wife, and they didn't even use the best take or the quote unquote best take, which was Ben genuinely breaking down in the moment. And according to Gavin, I don't want to take words out of his mouth, to paraphrase him, I think he said that was Ben in that moment, not the character. And he probably got to say things to the character that he wishes he maybe could have said to Jennifer Garner.
Right.
And again, that's speculative, but I do feel that the movie was a very raw thing, and that does come across in the film. So it's hard. It's like at the end of all what I just said, after all 2 minutes of me babbling on about it, is the movie worth seeing? It's not an easy question to answer. It's like, and I don't know how Jake feels about it. If someone said, should I go see The Way Back on Saturday night with my friends? It's like one of those things where like, it's good, but it's not great. You won't cry maybe, but you'll feel things. I mean, you know what I'm saying, Jake? It's one of those weird ones that finds that middle ground where you don't.
Yeah, I would tell people to go see
recommend it.
If people were saying, like I don't think anyone would dislike the movie.
They wouldn't
by any stretch.
But I wanted to love it.
I
wanted to love it. I wanted to cry. I wanted to feel it more. And I think you did too.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to, I think, the story just being a little disjointed. There's a couple times where I thought it was going to end and it didn't. So
I want to float a theory to you guys and to the listeners about something that Kevin just said, which is that a lot of times when you're watching this, you see it's a hard time to not see Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
And you don't see the character that he's playing. And I brought this up to transition us into our blend game this week, which is BenAffleckBlend. In looking over his filmography, I'm going to make an argument that Ben Affleck is not a great actor. I think he's a good actor, but I don't think
he's a great director.
He's a great director so far.
I mean, to your point, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know what our picks are, but I bet none of us picked our Ben Affleck film, because of his performance in it.
That is partially true of mine. But I did not go through his filmography and be like, oh, that's his home run, you know.
Okay, I'll tell you this. So I'll tell you what it is when we get to our picks. My favorite movie that he's in, I did not pick because the movie is not good because of him. Like he is not he is in like of all of his movies, I would say like that's the one that is my favorite, but I'm not picking it for a Ben Affleck blend because he didn't contribute to it being good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, then I think I know what your choice is. But I'm going to use an example, somebody who does this. I'm going to say Adam Driver for this reason. Every time I go to an Adam Driver movie, I think like he is such a distinct person that I'm never going to be able to believe him in such and such a role. And I always believe him in the role. He loses himself in the role every single time.
Yep.
I don't think Ben does that all the time. I think I'm more often than not, I'm watching Ben Affleck in a movie and I'm like, well, Ben Affleck's going to try to drill a hole on this asteroid, you know, but like Adam Driver just disappears into whatever role he's playing. And you know, we know plenty of performers who are like this, and it doesn't mean that Affleck's not a massive star, you know, like I think people make this comment about Tom Cruise a lot of times too. They'll be like, well, I'm just watching Tom Cruise in an action movie. Now, I think that undervalues what he brings to certain performances as well too. But and looking at the filmography, that was kind of a assumption I came up with. And then when I floated to Jake, I was pleased to find out that he kind of felt the same way.
Yeah. Matt Damon is a better actor than Ben Affleck.
Oh, I'd argue Matt Damon is a great actor.
And I'll tell you, the movie that shows that is Dogma. When the two of them are in scenes together, Damon is running circles around Affleck. And Affleck's good in that movie.
Do you think, okay, so we're about to get a movie with Adam Driver, Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to exemplify Affleck's acting skills?
I'm afraid it might.
See, I think Affleck is on a different level because of the films he's directed. Like, it's an interesting thing for me because there's the acting of Ben Affleck, which I've always enjoyed his films. I love Armageddon. I'm a fan of his work. But when he directed Gone Baby Gone and didn't put himself in it, I was like, that guy is insanely talented. And I agree with you. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a great actor, but he's a very good one. but I think him being a director puts him above someone like a Damon, in my opinion.
Why don't you start, Kevin? Tell us who your pick is.
Well, I feel like my pick is just obvious, right? Because I feel like I always talk about this scene. But my pick is Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Okay.
So it's funny because like Affleck, the first time I ever interviewed Ben Affleck, I guess this is the reason we do this blend game, right? Because it all comes from our personal
100%.
stories.
100%.
So when I first started off as a journalist in 2005, I was on a radio show. I had no connections. I had no television station. I had no camera crew. And then Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck decided to come through DC to Georgetown to premiere Gone Baby Gone. And there's a video of this, and it's horrifying to look back on it. But I'm wearing like
delightful.
this terrible like green collared shirt. I'm holding a microphone that doesn't actually work. So keep in mind, there's a camera so I had a friend of mine come out to stand behind me and film with like a cheap camera that was connected to a microphone that wasn't actually picking up any audio. And I don't remember if I knew that or I used the mic to make it look professional. I can't remember. It was one or the other.
I love that.
So Affleck
I
rolls
really
up.
hope it's the second one.
I'm sure it was that. I probably used it to look professional. Meanwhile, keep in mind, everyone to the right and left of me is like ABC and NBC. They have like these gigantic camera crews. There's lighting, and it's just me, like with my microphone and my friend holding the camera. So he walks up, and you guys have seen it, so you guys already know the story. But he walks up, and the first thing out of my mouth is, "Hey man, it's Shannon from The Fashionable Male," which is his Mallrats character. And meanwhile, this guy is trying to set himself as a serious director in Hollywood. He's directing Gone Baby Gone, which is a very serious subject matter. And then he has this punk kid talking about Kevin Smith movies.
That's like getting Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven and being like, didn't you do a movie with a monkey one time?
Well, so Affleck, I think Affleck was taken off guard because he'd probably done so much press for the film already that he was just ready to talk about the movie and go into the serious tone. He starts dying laughing. He starts asking me questions about like, "Are you a big Kevin Smith fan?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's do this, man." I was like, Clerks 2, that scene in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back when you talk about essing in someone's cereal, and he starts like dying laughing. So that was my first encounter with Affleck. And genuinely, my first encounter with Affleck ever was Mallrats, because in the year Mallrats came out, Silverchair, one of my favorite bands of all time at that time, had a song on that movie soundtrack. And that's how I found Mallrats, was because of Silverchair, which then led me to Kevin Smith, which then led me to Ben Affleck. And then I go down the rabbit hole, right? So then I watch everything Kevin puts out. Dogma, Chasing Amy, Mallrats. Then you get to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And this is where it becomes my favorite Affleck thing he's ever done. Affleck and Matt Damon, as everyone knows, do a scene in that movie about Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season. And they do the exact same scene with the same cast and same people as they did the original Good Will Hunting in that bar. And Jay and Silent Bob are in the background. It's a really funny shot where you see them getting moved out and then pushed back into the same shot. And Affleck and Damon are parodying their own characters that they wrote for Good Will Hunting. Even Gus Van Sant is in this scene, over to the right, counting his money. I don't know how Kevin pulled this off. But there's a moment in that scene where so Affleck's talking to the guy with the long hair. He's giving him the speech. Damon turns around. "What did I say? You'd be back in here regurgitating Gordon Wood." And I'm just staring at Affleck the whole time because he has frosted tips on his hair. And when he puts his arm around Damon and then looks down, he goes, "I don't like the sound of them apples, Will. What are you gonna do?" But he starts to crack, like laugh in that moment. And that was, to me, my favorite thing about Affleck, is because he was able to make fun of himself. And that's what we saw in Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, when he did that scene and listed off Argo jokes, Bruce Wayne, Thomas Wayne jokes, Martha jokes. And I always just found that funny because I feel like Kevin was able to pull things out of Affleck that no other filmmaker could. I feel like that's really kind of, Affleck likes to have fun, in my opinion. That's what I gather from their relationship. And you got to think about all the stuff they did together. Chasing Amy was a legitimately brilliant performance in that car when he tells Joey Lauren Adams he loves her. So to me, it was everything he did with Kevin I really truly loved. And specifically Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, he not only plays himself or the parody of himself in Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season, he also has that very famous scene where he explains the internet and does the Phantoms joke and has all those moments where they're just classic Affleck. When I think of Ben Affleck, that's the first thing I think about is Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Clerks 2, Chasing Amy. So that to me will always be the Ben Affleck I grew up with. And I go Strike Back because to me, it's my favorite thing he's ever done.
I think that was beautiful, Kevin, by the way. Fantastic walk down memory lane. Affleck gets another terrific curse thanks to Kevin Smith. So he does horseshit in Chasing Amy. Horseshit. But when he gets called out on the 10:07 and Matt Damon goes, "Oh, Jesus, again, Ben?" And he goes, "No, bullshit." The way that he phrases that.
I wasn't with a hooker last night. Yeah. No, I'm quoting the movie, but yeah, that scene it's Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Did you think you needed to tell us that you were quoting the movie?
Yeah,
Did you feel like you needed to specify that you weren't just saying that out loud?
The way that Affleck curses in that scene,
it's great.
It's
but
tremendous.
You know what's funny about I'm just thinking about back all these situations where I've brought up Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season to Ben Affleck or Matt Damon. The time I brought it up to Matt Damon was a movie called Contagion. So that's like a serious movie. So I'm in the middle of the interview and the interview ends and I go to Matt Damon. I go, "Any chance you'll make Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season?" And he starts breaking down laughing. I don't know why I asked it at such serious movies, but for some reason they both enjoyed it. But
Kevin,
Affleck is amazing.
I hate to tell you because you quote it so often, but I hate when Affleck does that voice.
Why? It's the best part.
I know that he's parodying himself, but that's when it goes like even too far. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Matt Damon pulls out a shotgun and shoots a guy, and then Affleck says applesauce. How is that not more crazy than...
I know. The voice drives me nuts. All right, so I'll go next, and I will let you guys know that my pick
I know your pick.
As I mentioned, partially... I'll say this, and I'll let Kevin guess. Partially because of his performance, and partially because of the movie itself. Kevin, my pick is...
Reindeer Games.
Oh, incorrect. That is not correct. That is not correct.
It's clearly Phantoms, because he's the bomb in Phantoms.
He's the bomb in
God.
Phantoms.
Please pick Phantoms just for that line.
It is the ultimate edition of Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Oh!
Yes.
Well done!
But here's why I'm going to say this, and I'll make it personal as well, too. I think I'm with Kevin in that I think he's the best Batman.
Hands down.
He's the best interpretation of Batman on the big screen. Now, you can make an argument that some of the other actors played better versions of Bruce Wayne. You can make the interpretation that some have had better villains in their films. But especially in the Ultimate Edition, the detective version of The Dark Knight, the suit, the armor, like everything about Batman, Ben Affleck nails. And I hate that he got shortchanged in Justice League because I would like to see his version of Justice League. I love from the very beginning the interpretation of how the end of Man of Steel and the destruction that was going on in the city is viewed from the point of view of Bruce Wayne and how he would react to the arrival of this alien. Brilliant decision by Snyder's part. I thought that the theatrical cut really gypped out a lot of really significant storylines, and I know that the majority of the people who watch Batman vs Superman only saw the theatrical cut and never bothered to watch the Ultimate Edition because they thought, why would I want to see a longer version of this? But it truly is a night and day version of that story. It fills in all of these gaps that...
I don't mean to cut you off, but what you just said, I have to mention this. I was interviewing Lawrence Fishburne one time for John Wick. I think it was 2 or 3. And I walked in the room and I said, I loved the Ultimate Edition R-rated cut of Batman vs Superman. He goes, what are you talking about?
What?
His guy, his agent or publicist came out to ask me about where to find it afterwards.
Are you kidding me? What?
That's how that's how deeply that film went away. So I only cut you off to explain to you that your point is completely valid. So much so the actors probably haven't even seen that cut.
That's crazy because it makes it into a different movie. Which realizing that helped me to understand that another version of a movie that Zack Snyder might be responsible for could exist out there and be better. And if anyone's
what are you referring to?
Or following me on social media, you'll know that my life has been changed by this book that I'm writing. And all of these people who are behind the Snyder Cut release of Justice League. Now, I'm not trying to make it about that, but what it has spent, I've spent the last year focusing very heavily on these 3 DC movies. And it has allowed me to really, truly appreciate everything that Ben Affleck did in Batman versus Superman, and even the theatrical cut. There's things that I pull out of things that he does in the theatrical cut of Justice League that make me realize that he was a terrific choice to play. Now, I do think they painted him into a corner in a bit by making him the older version of Bruce Wayne, the grizzled, been in Gotham for 20 years. It's hard to move forward in a franchise when that's your Batman, right? Like, there's a reason that Matt Reeves is casting a younger version, that he's going with Robert Pattinson. He can grow with him as a character. Snyder needed him to be that version of Batman for BVS, but I don't know how many more movies they could have made, realistically. But for a while, we got a great version of Batman, something that was very reminiscent of the Frank Miller. Like, there's a reason why there's iconic shots from Frank Miller DC panels that Snyder recreates,
the rain
right off the page. And I mean, there's a billion GIFs that you can put on Twitter that are just tremendous shots from BVS. And so I implore anyone listening to this, if you haven't yet seen the Ultimate Edition of that film, please go out of your way and spend the time to watch it. It's a longer cut, but it fills in all the things. When you were watching Batman vs. Superman and you were like, wait, did I miss something? Did they skip through something? This doesn't make any sense. It's because in the actual version that the director wanted you to see, that they didn't put into theaters, all of it makes sense. It fills in a lot better. And yes, I do hope that we get to see what Ben did for Zach in the longer version of Justice League. So.
And to Sean's point, the Ultimate Edition truly is the only way to watch that movie. The warehouse scene in R rating is beyond belief. Best Batman ever to grace the screen of cinema. I agree with you.
Jakey, close us out.
So my favorite movie, I was mentioning this earlier, that Ben Affleck is a part of, is Armageddon. I love Armageddon. Nice. I love everything about Armageddon. Make fun of me all you want. I think it has some really great cinematography. I think the score is fantastic. It's one of my favorite powerful presidential speeches. And also keep in mind, when you're 10 years old living in the shadow of NASA and Armageddon comes out in theaters, it's the coolest goddamn thing you've ever seen in your entire life.
And what did your father do?
Oh, and my father was a roughneck. He was an oil driller. So I was like, Dad, you can do that too, just like Bruce Willis.
God damn.
That being said, Armageddon is not good because of him. I won't say it's good in spite of him, but it's not good because of him. Therefore, I felt like I could not pick it for Ben Affleck Blend. So I'm going with Good Will Hunting. Good Will Hunting is a movie, and not even his performance in Good Will Hunting. That script, that dialogue is incredible. There are moments where I find myself, and I'm curious if you guys do that too. I'll be maybe sitting with 20 minutes to kill. I'm at work, I'm at home, whatever, on the train, and I'll just think, I want to watch that movie scene, and a movie scene will pop up in my head, and I'll pull it up on YouTube and just sit and watch it.
Yep.
And there are so many scenes from Good Will Hunting, but specifically that scene of Robin Williams' monologue about how, basically you might be the smartest man on the earth, but you don't know what it means to be human.
Wait, the park bench one?
Yeah, the park bench.
Okay, so not the it's not your fault.
No, not it's not your fault.
Which is also fantastic.
Yeah, you might be able to quote Shakespeare, but you don't know what it's like to be in love. You might be able to tell me the history of war, but you don't know what it's like to hold your friend as he's dying. Like that. But to your point, the fact that there are multiple ones that we could pull out that work on that screenplay.
And Affleck's not in them.
And Affleck's not in. But
I said to Gabe, is Good Will Hunting a Ben Affleck movie? And he was like, oh, it totally is. And even still, I was like,
but he wrote it, dude. He wrote it.
Or maybe he didn't. I don't know.
Or maybe he did. There is that famous, Okay, let me rephrase. He got an Oscar for writing it.
He certainly did, yeah.
And so I feel like of all of his movies, that I pull that one up and watch and rewatch and watch again the most often. I think everything about it. I mean, it elicited one of Robin Williams' best performances. And yeah, I honestly I don't remember much about Ben Affleck's performance in it. But I do remember a lot of the lines that are said, and they are said because Ben Affleck wrote them down.
What do you think is the movie that you watch the most on YouTube? A scene from.
Oh, mine's Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season. I watch it all the time.
You watch that scene all the time?
I watch that scene once a week, at least. It's a masterpiece.
It's either Tom Hanks killing Paul Newman in the rain.
Okay.
From Road to I'm Glad It's You. And there's a scene, and this is going to seem really random, but I just interviewed the second actor in this scene last week and brought it up to him that I watch the scene all the time. There's a scene in a movie called Charlie Wilson's War. And it's a scene, it's a Tom Hanks movie, directed, or I forget who directed, Mike Nichols?
Mike Nichols,
written by Aaron Sorkin.
Okay.
And there's a scene where Philip Seymour Hoffman bursts into the office of John Slattery and is complaining about why he didn't get a particular assignment. And starts accusing him, I didn't get assignment because you're sleeping with so-and-so's wife, and you know that I know. And then John Slattery's like, no, it's because you broke my window. And it's the most beautifully written, just two men tearing each other apart in this office.
Yeah.
It starts out fairly civil. And by the end of the conversation, they are screaming at each other using Aaron Sorkin dialogue. And on the way out, Phil Seymour Hoffman breaks his window again, which he just had filled in. I just love watching it because I just love both Philip and John Slattery are just so good in that scene, and the writing's so good. I mean, like if you're in a theater class and you need a dialogue to do with between two people, go find that scene. It's brilliant. And I told John Slattery the other day, dude, that scene is just but you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. So what was his response? He liked that one?
Oh yeah, he's like, but he gave all credit to Sorkin. He's like, that's all Sorkin.
If we're talking dialogue, the scene I watch a lot over and over is Baldwin's Glengarry Glen speech. I watched that with my dad a couple times.
ABC, always be close. I did that monologue for a theater class.
So good.
Mine is, I'm going to throw this out there, and there's an angle to it that I then learned. Something in the monologue that always caught me off guard. So it's the courtroom scene for Few Good Men.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I watch that. I'm probably with you, Kevin, where I watch that once a week. And
it's so good.
There's so many times where there's people who you do a really good job on something and you feel like you've done a really good job, and someone will come back and just sort of nitpick it a little bit. And I always want to just reply with, I would prefer you just said thank you,
and move on with your day.
But there's the line, the way that Nicholson says it, he says, son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's going to do it? You, Lieutenant Weinberg. He turns to Kevin Pollak and spits that out at him. And I always thought, what a weird thing. Why did he single out Lieutenant Weinberg in that moment? He's yelling at Kathy. He's yelling at Tom Cruise's character. And I listened to Kevin Pollak on the Rich Eisen program, who does sports, but Rich Eisen loves Hollywood too and talks about these things. And Kevin Pollak said that it's like an ad lib.
What?
That Nicholson threw it in.
That's cool.
And he also thought it was very strange that he got called out by Nicholson. But then because he did it the first time, they had to keep it. And so it got worked in as part of the monologue. And so it doesn't explain why it's there necessarily. And Kevin Pollak is Jewish and he's able to make jokes about himself. And he's like, what's wrong with my people, right? Haven't we endured enough that you have to throw me out under the bus also? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? Is it really that out of the ordinary that I'd be in the military kind of thing? And he does a whole funny bit, but I thought that was fascinating because I think it's such a weird sort of bit that Nicholson threw in. Angrily.
Did Kevin talk about the alternate take about you can't handle the tooth? Did they talk about that? The take they put in there for that? I was just curious because I know he was having a toothache that day.
Fortunately, I remember bring that up.
Yeah.
Pollak has had a great. We should do BlendGame one day too, because he's had a run of movies that is totally underrated. And again, find his interview on Rich Eisen because he just went through a list of films that he had appeared in, and it sort of.
Have we ever done Rob Reiner blend?
I don't think we have.
Talk about an underrated director. When you start listing all the movies he's directed, and the fact that he's not considered one of the best directors of all time blows my freaking mind.
Well, he's made some really bad movies as well.
Yeah, but he's made more great, genuinely great with a capital G, great movies than a lot of directors that we give credit for.
That's probably true. Yeah. All right. Anyway, audience picks for Affleck, Ben Affleck blend. Michael Kamens broke it down 2 different ways, which I didn't know you could do, but apparently that's the rules. He said for acting, Chasing Amy, for directing, Gone Baby Gone, and for writing, Good Will Hunting. Well, I mean, that's cheating. I mean, that's his entire filmography. D.L. Kiedis and many others went with one that I almost went with, which is Gone Girl. I mean, you get Affleck working with Fincher. And the reason why he's so perfectly cast for Fincher is because the character has to be an asshole. Like, he has to be a grade A asshole who you hate. And I think Ben Affleck brings a little bit of that to the surface. Carrie Vanderberg says Batman is his favorite role, but The Town is his favorite film that he directed. And Paul Marsh also says The Town. I think Gone Baby Gone is better than The Town.
Yeah, I think Argo is better than The Town.
I think Gone Baby Gone is better than Argo.
I agree.
Gone Baby Gone is the best movie he's made.
Yeah,
I think Live by Night is unwatchable.
It's a film.
It is a film.
It
so
exists.
much participation this week. I want to thank everybody for playing along on social media. For next week, we're going to be choosing our favorite original song made for a motion picture.
Ooh.
So you're going to reach out to us on Twitter using hashtag SongBlend.
I know mine.
And Kevin already knows this.
Oh my God.
And you're going to let us know what your favorite original song written for a movie is going to be. You can also email us at ReelBlend@cinemablend.com, which
That's
is
a
a place
good
where you
one.
can
That's
also
a
I'm
really
send
excited
us
about mine.
a place where Kevin's definitely going with I won't say it.
I'm curious. I don't know what it is.
Oh, I know exactly what
There's
it is.
no way you know what it is.
I may not know the song, but I know what it's from.
Give me the movie.
I'll text it to you.
No, tell me. I want to know.
You want me to give it away right now?
Yeah,
It's okay.
It's from Popstar.
That's wrong.
Ah, dang. All right. I thought for
I
sure
do love
it'd be from
Popstar, but it's not Popstar.
You do love Popstar. All right. Also at ReelBlend@cinemablend.com, the email address, you can send us a review. And this week's review comes from M. Hickerson119, who says 3 friends who love film and share that passion. 3 friends.
3 friends and Gabe.
He says 3 friends, parentheses, and their producer, Gabe, who may or may not be real, share their thoughts on film in a timely debate format that is always entertaining and respectful. There are a ton of movie podcasts out there, but there are a few that I find myself wanting to return to as much as this one, with interviews and weekly thoughts on the movies hitting theaters and home media, as well as looking back on the long history of cinema. This is an entertaining show that often seems to end far too soon. Well, at that, my friend, we're going to bring this episode to a close, unfortunately. So we will be back next week. We have an interview that is blanking on who we're talking to. So I will wrap it up because I honestly don't forget. I know we have an interview next week. We have a couple of really big ones coming up. Stay tuned to our social media channels where we will keep you guys up to date with when the latest shows are dropping. Be sure to subscribe to the show. Please tell your movie-loving friends that they should come over and listen to the ReelBlend podcast as well, too, because we're always talking about, as this review said, the latest movie news, breaking titles, and reviews for things in movies, and I'm just stammering at this point now. So, Kevin, kick us out of here until next week.
Dunkirk.
Thank you.